My favorite part about the interviews and the people that I've met on this journey of 52 weeks of why, number one is learning from people what caused them to discover their why. And number two is interviewing and talking to friends about their story that I know, and I might know just from passing conversations or because we run into each other relatively often, but I don't know their story. And it's been so great to hear other people's story and to get to know my friends better. And today is a wonderful example of that. My guest today is somebody that not only impacted me when I met her, but also my whole team. My whole team wanted to get on a Zoom meeting with her and go through this concept of the miracle morning. I'm not sure if we'll get to the miracle morning today, but this is something that she subscribes to and has lived and has attributed some of her more life-changing years to the miracle morning. So my whole team heard this and they're like, we have to get on this call. We've got to know more about this. And it's just interesting to me how in some very brief interactions, you can get that one thing from somebody that you take and you carry with you for the rest of your life. Before I introduce her, though, superstar, I have one very quick quote I want to share. This one's easy, and it says, the best teachers are those who show you where to look, but don't tell you what to see. In my life, I always wanted somebody to show me what to see. So I was always very frustrated when somebody would say, hey, look over there, because I always wanted to know what, right? And my 9-year-old daughter is almost exactly the same way. It's fun for me to hear quotes like this that remind me of one of my own flaws and help me to go back and kind of revisit, okay, maybe I need to do a better job of this. My guest today is Christy Solar. Christy, I love you. Thanks so much for being here.
I love you and thank you for having me.
Christy is a fellow employee of Fairway Independent Mortgage. We met, I think, 5-ish years ago. It was either at Chairman's Club or one of my first annual meetings in Madison. I think I was at the last annual meeting in Madison, and that may have been where we met first. And just kind of kindred spirits. Our past is very similar in terms of grew up in a religious household, attended preparatory school, went to college because that's the path that we were told we needed to go down. Rebelled against that lifestyle for different reasons, but went down a different path that we chose on our own. And at some point in time, woke up in life and said, whoa, wait a minute, I'm going down the wrong road, right? So Christy is in Louisiana. I'm sure that you will hear that in her voice and her attitude when she talks. Born and raised in Baker, Louisiana. And you said mom and dad are still together after 60 years of marriage?
Yep, 63, 64 years of marriage, still together. Yeah.
My goodness. And so you grew up in a small town like where I live currently, and in a very religious Southern Baptist family, and went to a school that was specifically oriented around college prep, no sports, no anything else that would distract you from your studies, from middle school all the way to high school, and graduated from that. When you were in that program, was it apparent to you that you were in a school with maybe a different group of people than the public school that was down the road from you? Were you aware of the differences between the education you were getting and what you were learning and what those around you were learning?
Oh, yeah, for sure, 100%. This was an engineering school, so it was very apparent that it was different. Everybody else was enjoying football on Friday nights, and we were studying, right? Everybody was getting out of class at 10 a.m. on their senior year, and we were there till 4:30. So it was extremely apparent that this was a prep school for college. That was everybody there. I think 90 something percent of the students that graduated there would go on to be to college. What's crazy when I look back now, there's doctors, there's, attorneys, there's all these people that I went to school with that are super uber successful now. So it was super apparent that that was the plan for your life. You go to school, middle school, high school, and then you go off to a really good college.
Similar to you, went to a college preparatory school, private school in Boca Raton, Florida, called Pinecrest. And same thing. Everybody that graduated from there went to Duke, Yale, Princeton, Harvard, Brown, and I went to this cute little college called Florida Atlantic University coming out of that. And you kind of went down a similar path, right? You did not go to the Ivy League or the upper higher level institutional blue blood college. You chose to stay local and go to Louisiana College for a year, and then Louisiana State.
Yeah, I actually went to LC, which was about 3 hours from our house. It was a private college. It was a very good private college. It was a Baptist college. So I went to Baptist college and then studied there for about a year, and then moved to the largest, everybody's heard of the LSU Tigers, right? So to Louisiana State University in my sophomore year of college.
When you made that transition to college coming out of the school you went to, was it, for me, it was like a bomb dropped. Everybody in my school, literally, we all dissipated to far ends of the country after we graduated. Very difficult to keep in touch with people because they literally were gone. Was it similar for you as well?
Yeah. Super similar, especially when I went to LC. I didn't know anybody there. Then when I came back to LSU, a number of my high school friends had, gone to LSU because LSU is a really great school. So I did reconnect with some of them there. But, I just found out, like, in high school, we didn't have, a lot of the after school things. We didn't have football. So, I had high school friends, and some of them I still speak with, but it wasn't that close knit group like I thought I would have had if I went to school where we went, spent, under the, what's it called? The Friday night lights, right? We didn't have that. We had soccer. So that's about it.
Yeah. So when you came back and went to LSU, you had been in a long-term relationship, and that relationship continued from a young age all the way to LC and then back to LSU. Is that right?
Not really. You know how young relationships are. You'll date 7th, 8th grade. You might see each other in 10th grade, 11th grade. I dated somebody in the 12th grade. But when I got back to LSU, I started seeing Ryan, and he was the guy that my parents were like, you cannot see, right? Totally different from me. Not necessarily the most upstate, he's a great guy, but he might have smoked a little something and drank a little something. And I was the prim and proper Baptist girl, right? So when he would show up and sit by me in church on Sunday morning, everybody was like, oh my God, Ryan's in church, right? But just a really great guy with a great heart. And what was really funny about him, I'll tell you a story real quick. He protected me. He didn't let me around a lot of his friends. He loved that I was the good Baptist girl. And when we were about, time kind of gets away. I'm getting old. I'm clicking on 50 dolls. So, but I guess when we were about 20 years old, my daddy was the fire chief in the town that we lived in. And about 4 a.m., I heard the scanner go off, and there was a fire at Ryan's home. And unfortunately, he passed away in that fire. And for me, having this, I really had a perfect life growing up. I had great parents. They were, of course, just of, moderate income, but did well. And they always guarded me and protected me. So I'd lost grandparents that had aged, but I had never really had that kind of loss. So that loss was one pivotal point for me. Didn't really know how to handle that or process that, right? Somebody that, and how when you're in your 20s, you are passionate about who you love, right? So, I mean, I was writing his name on paper in class, just like we all do. So for me, that was a really big deal when he passed away. And his parents asked me to go in the home and go through all of his things. And that was a really hard thing for me. And then his truck sat in my yard for 3 or 4 months while we tried to sell it. So it was just a really hard time in my life for me. And that led me to the next chapter, whenever you're ready.
Something that I said to myself and repeated to myself over and over as I was in my teenage years and my early 20s, was to never forget the intensity of the emotions that I was feeling, and never denigrate or minimize the emotions of my kids when I have them.
Yes.
Because I don't know if it's age that dulls the intensity of these emotions, or if it's the fact that we've experienced them more than a couple times, that it just feels like I couldn't go hang out with my friends that night and the world was ending, right? Like there was nothing more important than that.
It's funny because I have a daughter that's 21 now. And when we have these boy issues, I'm like, oh my gosh, you'll forget that in 20 years. But I think back, I mean, that time in my life, I thought I would never heal. I mean, in fact, I'm 46 and I still have items of his in our attic. Like my husband just knows that was a really big traumatic time for me. So that was, so I still am that mother that I'm like, oh, you're going to deal with that. But I still 20 something years later, still have his clothes in my attic. So, yeah.
Yeah. And that's part of, I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at, right? Is that I'm aware of it when I say,
yes,
it's not as big of a deal as you think it is. It's not, you're going to get over it, or just go to your room until you calm down. And then then that little, the voice in me says that she's really feeling the intensity of this, and maybe going and wrapping an arm around her and telling her that you love her and you understand what she's feeling and you're there for her is a better approach than minimizing and saying you're just going to get over it. And I struggle with this daily because it is a daily thing, right? It truly is. But so understanding the loss and the period of time in your life where that loss was intense. Kind of talk about what happened that wasn't so great next.
Yeah. So after that loss, I guess I was just searching for something to feel like to just numb the pain, right? Just numb the pain. And I was never like a go outer, as I call it, but started kind of going out and doing some things and met a couple guys here and there, that kind of lifestyle. And then got involved with somebody that I had known my entire life. And, honestly, and like I told you before we started this call, I'm going to speak very candidly because I learned a few years ago. Now, it took me a long time to do this, and I usually couldn't speak about this, but I had to forgive myself. And once I forgave myself, that veil of what others thought about me or thought about my decisions kind of went out the window, right? And I feel like one of my jobs on this earth and one of my whys is to tell people that your past does not have to define what your future is, but that is also a choice. So I made some really bad choices. We talked about people come into your life, but it's really not the people, it's the choices that you make when you meet those people, right? So it's my choice to say no, and I didn't. And in my early 20s, I guess around 22 years old, 22 years old, I got pregnant. And in the South back then, Southern Baptist mama, that's not going to fly, right? Church people are not going to like that. Nobody's going to like that. So we have to hide it. And being 20, 20 years ago is different than me in 20 now. My daughter's really independent now. I was not that. I was very dependent on my parents financially. I lived there. So it was their choice for me to have an abortion. And I am not downing anybody that had one or agrees with that or does not. This is not about that. But for me, that was a very hard thing. I went to that clinic and I found out that I was having twins. And I went home and I begged my mother to let me keep those babies. And that was just not an option. And for my life at that moment, that was the only choice that I had. So, and again, not condoning, not going against it, but for me, it set the sails in motion for a lot of bad decisions after that. When I woke up that next day from having that procedure, and of course the guy was gone, he could care less. He was glad it happened. And I really went down a path. I started using drugs heavily. A lot of, there was a drug called K. It was a horse tranquilizer, ketamine. Started using that. Started using crystal meth, which was a different than what you see now being made in the backyard. It was in labs. It was a party drug. Cocaine, acid, ecstasy, pretty much anything that I could numb the pain with was going to be used. Attended a lot of raves. Dolls, you and I have talked about that lifestyle. Just did a lot of things. Time kind of went away from me. And I just, there were, months, I don't know that my parents really knew where I was or who I was with. There were some pivotal points in my life where I remember being in New Orleans and being in a round group. It was in this gross hotel, and they were all shooting up heroin. And when it got my turn, I'd never done that. The person by me looked at me and said, "You don't belong here. Get out." And he took me downstairs and he put me in a cab and he sent me home. And I truly believe today that that was an act of God, because let me tell you what happened not long after. So not long after that, of course, as any drug user, I started dating my drug dealer, because that's just what happens, right? So we were dating and we had been together for a year and a half. And we had been partying one weekend and I had started having pains in my side. And I showed up at the little local hospital thinking it was an ulcer. And I walked in and they said, "We'll take you to x-ray. Could you be pregnant?" Anything like that. I'm like, no, 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 no. So we go to the x-ray room and the x-ray machine would not work. It just would not work. So they said, "We're going to take you down to ultrasound." And when they took me down to ultrasound, he said, "Ma'am, do you know that you are pregnant?" And that moment in my life, laying on that table, was the first of many changes that I would make. And I realized that I had a life inside of me, but then I also realized that I had been doing a whole lot of drugs, and this could be a problem for this child. So I remember what happened a few years back when I told my parents that I was pregnant. And I said, that will not happen again. So I went to my daddy and I just said, "Look, I'm pregnant. And I have two choices. I need to either kill myself or I need to keep this baby, because that is really the only option. Like, we're going to die together or we're going to have the baby." And I know that that sounds so crazy to talk about, but suicide has always been a go-to for me. We talk about mental health issues. The first thing I think when something goes bad is I just need to die. And I know that that is so weird to say on a call like this, but many people have that thought, right? And doesn't matter how successful you get, that is a mental issue that you have to overcome. Suicide runs in my family. My, I call her my sister. I didn't know her that well. She was a lot older than me. My parents raised her. She killed herself. My aunt killed herself. So it was always kind of prevalent in my family. And my daddy said, "No, that is not an option. Like, we're going to take care of this baby. So I had the first person that I said saved my life, and that was Mackenzie Solar, and she is now 21 years old. So I remember laying in my parents' bed and wanting the drugs and wanting the friends and just having to let it all go. And I was 3 months pregnant, William, 3 months pregnant. So I had this beautiful, healthy baby, and I thought God just saved us, right? So he just saved us. So her dad was had his own issues. He was not involved. So about a year later, I met my husband. We got married when she was 2. And I would love to say that we lived this fantastic, beautiful, wonderful life. But what happened is I never dealt with all the pain. I never dealt with, I allowed men to use me. I allowed it, but I was abused. I was used. I was hurt. I was done everything you can imagine to. And so I never dealt with that. So when I met this amazing man that is my husband, and thank God he has put up with me for 21 years, 20 years this year, marriage. When I met him, I had so many walls. I think so many of us let the pain of the past dictate our future, right? So he was, in my mind, it was great. And we had this great family, but he was going to leave. He was just going to leave, and it was going to happen. So he probably spent the first 15, 16 years of marriage in this fight or flight with me. I started chasing success. We had in 2000, I've had multiple strokes due to a blood disorder. 2015 had a major one and still just worked with one hand and just kept the business going, did a lot of loans. Success didn't fix it. Money didn't fix it. Marriage didn't fix it. Children didn't fix it. It was me that had to fix it. And we lost everything we owned on our first floor of our house to a massive flood. I had an emotional affair after that. Just let me tell you, I have put this beautiful man through hell because I carry my issues, right, dolls? We carry our issues on with us. And I guess about, Sarah Milton, our good friend, will probably correct me on this, but I guess about 4 or 5 years ago, we went on this retreat, and we called it the Doodah retreat. It was a bunch of girls in Fairway. And I really realized that I was always trying to save that little girl, like hide that little girl, push her back. I wanted everybody to see the successful woman. I wanted to be the perfect person because I didn't want anybody to see who I had hurt or how I was hurt or what I had done. And I really realized my why then. And I'm talking a lot, but I think it's important that you have to know what your why is. And money doesn't fix it. And marriage doesn't fix it. And having a bunch of babies doesn't fix it, right? You have to fix it. So I was always trying to be this perfect Southern belle. And, what I showed on Facebook, if any of my Facebook friends watch this, a lot of people I grew up with won't even know I went through that because it was so well hidden. But after that, I got this tattoo and it says Amplify Hope. And I'm all tatted up. It's just what I do now because I forgave myself and I'm unapologetic. And it says Amplify Hope because that was my mission. And I'll tell you something, William. When I learned what my why was, that my why was not money, that mortgages was just a vehicle to let me share my story and help people. When I realized that, the healing that took place, the healing in my marriage, the healing in my business, right? The healing in my friendships, but most of all, the healing in myself. I've lost 130 or 40 pounds in the past few years. I have just really become who I'm meant to be because I know whose I am, right? And what I was meant to do. And when you can overcome that, it all starts with forgiveness. And I speak candidly about the abortion and the drugs and the men and the bad decisions because I forgave myself. And it's not my business what anybody else thinks about the decisions I made. And that, my friends, is powerful. And I'm going to let you ask me any questions because I have one more powerful story to share with you on my journey.
Man, there's so much to unpack there. First, it takes a lot of strength and bravery to be able to take your story and share it. And I have to acknowledge that and recognize and thank you for being brave and for being willing to open up your heart and open up your past to people in hopes that it will help them in the midst of you opening yourself up for more potential harm or more potential fear. But you hit on a couple of things, and I'm gonna reference a few people that I've been reading, and because it's interesting the progression that you went down. So one of my favorite quotes is from Jim Rohn, who says, "Your past should be a place of reference, not a place of residence."
Yeah.
And this is important because now I've moved into kind of Dr. Joe Dispenza's teaching, and he's kind of a little bit off the deep end, but I love that about him. But he talks a lot about how our brains operate in patterns and repetition. And if we spend every day contemplating our past, then we're reliving the past over and over again. And he talks a lot about how our body, our physical body, doesn't know the difference between an actual experience and a brain contrived reliving of an experience. So experiencing something and then going back and reliving it over and over and over again, you are inducing hormones and stress levels in your body that can do damage. And there's lots of scientific studies that back this up, that people who have experienced hardship and continue to relive that hardship, their health immediately began to decline to a point of almost death. And you know, they almost all of them, from Jim Rohn to John Gordon to Maxwell to Dispenza, they all talk about how real change and real transition happens when you stop living in the past and you stop beating yourself up for the things that you did in the past, and instead plan a future of who you want to be, where you want to be, what you want to be, while actively pursuing it in the present. Because the present is ultimately the only thing we have control over. You can't be frantic about the past. You can't be worrying about the future. Right now is the only thing that we can control. And I think whether you knew the articulation of everything I just said or not, you literally embody that exact change. You went about it through the school of hard knocks.
Yeah.
And had to get beat down to get lifted back up again. But the reality is that you, as soon as you began forgiving yourself for your past, you could then begin to plan a future and then execute that now. And I know this from just experiencing you every single day, that you're very mindful of being in the present moment.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that I know while we talk, emails are coming in and phone calls and voicemails and like there's a lot going on, but you are always very mindful. Even when we're at a dinner together with our buddies from Seattle, when we were in San Diego, like as busy as we were, the phone was never present except for taking a picture, because you always wanted to be in that moment and you wanted to be present with people and give people the respect of being present. So it really just, it's cool to hear that you embody what I've just been studying and learning and reading, and that you're a success story of that, of the ability to forgive yourself for your past, to not judge yourself or allow other people to judge you for it, and accept it and understand that I'm not that person anymore, right? That person who I was then, I have moved on to being someone else. So now when you talk about amplifying hope, um, this obviously is something that happened because you had a moment of hope, right? You had a moment that hope was that hope brought about by a fork in the road that was, I mean, it was the person who created the fork in the road your daughter? Was she the one who, when you realized you were pregnant, was it Claire who all of a sudden gave you a different path and you knew because Claire was in you and you were now responsible for this life and you had missed out on the opportunity previously that you now, this was it. You were going to now make a different direction for life?
Yeah. So I think as we grow and we meet people, new people cause new forks in the road, right? So Claire was the first fork in the road that I knew that I had to be successful. I just knew that I had this little person that depended on me and I had to be successful. But I think as we grow, and that's why life is a journey, right? We have new experiences and new forks in the road and new people that create that. And then, of course, we know Louise Thaxton. She and Kim Guillory created another fork in the road for me with business. And then, Sarah Middleton created another fork in the road with me for owning who I am and being who I am. Then my Judah Sisters, which is a fairway group of women that we all just kind of get together and have a good time. They created another fork in the road for me. My best friend Hannah, we had another experience this past week. I just think now I'm recognizing the forks, right? And that is so important. I don't think there's one thing in life that changes you and sets you on the same path and you never get off that path. I think life is a curvy road, isn't it? And I want to share a story real quick and two more quick things that I think are so important that God's impressing me to tell today. I always watched all these people stand on stage, and Jake, our CEO, calls me on stage because I like to talk. You guys can tell that. I apologize in advance. But I always saw these people on stage and thought, I would never be as good as that because of what I did, right? Because of who I was. And I'm just here to tell you today, that's BS, right? William and I, we've talked about it. We've shared a lot of stories. We've done a lot of things. Who you are and who you choose to be in the future has nothing to do with who you were before, right? That is just the molding. And those experiences, bad experiences, I try to see everything with gratitude, an attitude of gratitude. Those bad experiences gave me drive. They let me see how I don't want to live so I can live the life that I'm meant to live. But I'll tell you two quick things. So one quick thing is, and this is crazy, and William, you don't even know this. So we go back to my daughter, and she's 21, and my husband adopted her, and she's amazing. And, but she is a child, and she always has this who is my biological father deal, right? And I'm like, well, one day when the time is right, and we don't know how that's going to look. So we had been kind of praying about that and just not really sure how to go about that. And I left our friend Shannon Alexander's house this past, I think it was March or April or May, somewhere. It was after COVID. We kind of stuck off together and went and spent some time together. And I'm in an airport, and this is about forgiveness. I'm in an airport in Dallas, Texas, and I'm on the phone with my best friend Hannah, and I look up and I see Claire's biological father. 20 years later, in an airport in Dallas, boarding the same plane that I'm boarding. Well, long story short, we ended up sitting next to each other on a flight back to Baton Rouge. And I will tell you, I call it the healing journey because he has been clean and sober for probably, I think, 5 or 6 years. He told me the story of how when he got the papers for adoption, he was going to fight it. He showed up at the courthouse, saw Mike and I walking in with Claire, and just knew that he had to let her go because he could not give her what she needed. And he had never remarried. He had never married or had children because he always had this guilt. And I let him know on that flight that I forgave him. And 2 weeks later, he had the honor of meeting our daughter. And 3 or 4 weeks ago, he finally married the woman that he had been with for 6 or 7 years. and now is the daddy that he's supposed to be to her children. And he and Claire have now reconnected in their way. And so that is forgiveness. That was another fork in the road for me, because let me tell you something, it's not easy to forgive those that hurt you so many years ago. So we had that fork in the road, and we have had the privilege of getting to. I looked at wedding pictures the other day. Still hard for me, I'll admit, but of him and his new wife and Claire, and just to see how all these journeys have come full circle, and how when you forgive yourself, when you forgive yourself, the doors will open, and it will allow you to forgive others and help them heal. And I never thought that I would have the privilege to help him heal. Um, and to My daughter didn't need another daddy, and he's not her daddy, but he is her biological father. And she had a right to know that. And it has been a crazy year of COVID, but we have had some beautiful experiences. And then to end, what I want to say, last week I was in Las Vegas, and my best friend's brother was tragically passed away. And I was standing in Vegas on the sidewalk at about 9 o'clock at night, and hearing her scream and cry. And she's also my assistant at work, and feeling very helpless and hopeless. And I just thought, we got to bring some light to this situation. And when you learn to forgive yourself and you learn to find gratitude, you can find gratitude and beauty in tragedy. And I'll tell you, we've had some amazing things happen. The funeral, and I'm not going to speak too much of that, but was fully paid for by some wonderful friends. We had Her mom had some release of some things that she was holding some guilt of, done, let go because of that. We found out some things after the death. Um, just so much beauty from tragedy. But see, you have to find it. I think my whole story and my whole life, I look back and I think, God, from the flood and the drugs and the abortion and the babies and and I look back and I think, but God, there was so much beauty out of tragedy. And I think that, when you ask me my why, it is just to amplify that hope, just to let people know that your current situation doesn't define your future. You can sit in it and sulk in it, or you can find the beauty and you can move on to the life that you're meant to have. And I think I got really comfortable with telling all of these things that weren't pretty, because I knew that there was healing in that, William. I knew that there was hope and there was beauty. And so I'm sitting here today and doing a lot of loans and helping a lot of people, but I am just forgiven. But most of all, I'm forgiven by me. And that's my story.
The coolest part about the story of you in the airplane riding next to him is that you could have been fully rationalized, and everyone around you would have come to your support and your back and patted you on the back had you not done what you did. Had you said, I can't believe what you did, I will never forgive you, I had to do this. And it's interesting to me that in those moments where the voice of the naysayer is speaking to us, and we have the ability to not listen. That I've said repeatedly that voice isn't us. That voice doesn't define us. That voice doesn't have to be the person that we are.
I just want to say that we've talked a lot about forgiveness, forgiving yourself. And I have found that to those who have been given grace, it is much easier to give grace to others. As with most of the times in my life, I've had so many people who have loved me, forgiven me, seen the best in me when I didn't always see the best in myself. And once I learned to forgive myself, then I was able to realize my potential. So, for anybody listening to this that is sitting there today thinking, I'm not enough, I can't be enough, let me tell you that is a choice. If I had let my past dictate my future, there is no telling where I would be. But it starts with being okay with who you are so you can be who you are supposed to be. So I would just encourage you today to start with forgiveness. Forgive yourself, give yourself grace, and just remember all those journeys that you went through were for a reason so that you can become who you are meant to be. Thanks again for having me.